There you go. Hello and welcome to another screencast edition of Autodesk Maya. Today we'll be focusing on creating a hand rig. So previously before we did the steps to create a back twist and the spine roll. We are going to use the same principles that we did for the spine twist and the spine curl with this. So basically, it's the same principles. The only difference it's in more of a smaller scale. So I did a previous setup for two of my fingers here. I'm going to show you one example how to set up a finger curl or fist curl for your all your fingers, and also one for your thumb because the thumb is a little bit different. You have at least one joint that pivots instead of your typical two like your other fingers. So we'll get into that right now. So we have our setup here. So what I'm going to do is go to Create, NURBS Primitive, and select the box that says Circle. It'll open up my circle options. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up into my normal axis of Z. Once I have that, I'm going to press Create. This will give me a horizontal setup, a horizontal, basically a vertical horizontal setup of the circle in this axis. So once I'm going to do that, I'm going to label this. I'm going to call this left ring control. Yeah, left ring control. That's going to be a good setup. Once I have that, what I'm going to do is group it. I'm going to relabel that group into left ring control group as that. Once I have that, I'm going to select my control group. I'm going to press my V key and drag it up right here all the way to the hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in ever so slightly. And I'm going to try to snap it into the ring, the knuckle of the ring finger right there. So once you have it snapped, it should be there onto the knuckle joint of your ring finger. Once you have that, I'm going to resize this, select the control group, and resize this to a more reasonable size for your finger curl. There we go. So now that I have that, I'm going to sort of play with this a little bit more. Let's see. There we go. So I'm going to select my attribute editor. I'm going to go to my thumb control. I'm going to go to my ring control right here. My ring control tab on my attribute editor. What I'm going to do is go all the way to display. Then I'm going to select drawing overrides. I'm going to enable those overrides and I'm going to change up the color. So I'm going to give it into like a hot pink or something like that. So there we go. Once we have that, we should be set. So what I'm going to do is go to my set menu, make sure you set it to animation. If it is already in animation, don't worry about it. So what you're going to do is go to the key menu, select key, go to set driven key, and select set. This will open up your set driven key box that you have right here. And what you're going to do is select your L ring control, and you're going to load it as the driver. Once you have that, what you're going to do is check to see to which axis it's going to be pointing. If you're going to do the ring curl, which is going to be forwards and backwards. Since once we notice, mine is pointed to Z. So I'm going to select my rotate Z. Now that I have that, what I'm going to do is go to my root control here and cascade my hierarchy of my spine right here. I'm going to sort of extend out my outliner. And let's see. I'm going to go all the way to, once I find the L ring metacarpal, I'm going to sort of cascade that hierarchy right there until you got everything. So what I'm going to do is select my knuckle and highlight my knuckle, joint, end, and tip. Since I already have that, I'm going to load this as my driven. Now, before we do anything else and begin to key, we need to make sure that your point of access for your joints are on the same level. Because if not, you're going to have some issues where your fingers will sort of dislocate in a very ugly manner. So, of course, Z is facing forward, X is facing right, Y is facing up. So we got that, we got that. If something is off kilter, like on the tip, then make sure you go to your component mode over here, and then open this up, and just select your question mark to enable this local rotation axis. Don't forget, when you're doing that, go to display and transform display and local rotation axis. Once you have that, go back to your regular mode right here, and you're good. Since everything's just pretty much fine, I'm going to select all of these right here. And I'm going to figure out what rotation axis is it going. I notice this is going to rotation of Z, since my Z axis is right here, which is blue. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to curl it all the way and check to see if it checks out just nicely, which it does. It should be going clean like that. So just go Control Z just to go back. So we have rotation Z for your control right here, and our rotation Z for our joints. So both of them are going to be rotate Z. Once you have that, double check everything here, 0, everything here, 0. You got it, key it, and double tap. Good. So now that you have that, we're going to select back our ring control again. We're going to see if our values when we pull forward is if it's going to be negative or positive. So when I pull forward, it tells me it's going to go negative right here. So I need to know that. So when I go backwards, it's going to be positive. So my first keying of my values, I'm going to put in negative 90. So once I have that, I'm going to select all of these right here and curl up just like that. Now, it's great if you have it all curled up. Sometimes you may need to sort of individually select one of your joints. So I'm going to select my end joint right here and curl it up just nicely where it gives you like a hard right angle like that. So now that you have that, rotation Z for ring control is negative 90. Your joints should be set to rotation Z. Once you have that, key it. Select your ring control again and select 0. Type in your 0 as your value, and you shall be back to your neutral standpoint. Now, since we have that, we need to make our the opposite of the curl. What it's going to do is sort of stretch out, even though if it's impossible. But we want your character to be flexible as much as possible. So I'll put my rotation of the ring controls set to the value of 90 right here. Then I'm going to select all my joints here and actually pull it out like this. So maybe just a little bit more. There we go. Yeah, it looks painful, but you want them to do that. Again, look at your thumb. You have a hitchhiker's thumb. If you look at your hand, if you stretch it all out, it sort of curves out. So you want it to do that. You want it to be exaggerating. So once you have that, ring control set to 90. Joint should be like this, exaggerated like this at rotation Z. Once you got it, key it, double tap, good. Now set it back to 0. Test drive it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then you may have to break connections and redo it again. To avoid any accidental selections of translation or scales, the best bet is to sort of lock and hide your stuff. So what you're going to do is go to your channel box and layer editor, select translate, hold control, then select your scale and visibility. Now right click, and select lock and hide selected. This will hide everything. Then what you're going to do next is go back to your attribute editor right here. Get rid of this. I'm going to go to, let's see, display and select drawing overrides. Okay, got that already. Sorry. So I'm going to go actually to limit information. And I'm going to go to rotation. And I'm going to enable my rotation Z. I'm going to put my minimum value of negative 90 here and my positive 90 as my maximum key. So when I pull this up and down, I won't overextend it without anything. So it's going to stay to that value that I keyed in. So with everything else, you're going to repeat the same process with all 4 of your fingers. As for your thumb, this requires a little bit more finesse with it. So before I do anything else, don't forget to select your ring control group. And what you're going to do is parent it to the ring metacarpal. So you're going to parent it to the joint that is before the joint that you are creating for. So if there's a knuckle, then the knuckle joint before the knuckle is going to be your metacarpal. So make sure you do that. So once you have that, we're going to do the same process again for your thumb. Thumb requires a little bit more finesse and more detail. So again, normal X to Z, create, great. I'm going to call this L thumb control. I'm going to group it, relabel it, L thumb control group. I got it. Now what I'm going to do, hold the V key, snap it, try to snap it into my thumb knuckle joint, which is right here. Center it. Rotate and tumble your camera view to make sure it's centered and in place. If it isn't, then fix it. Now, with your thumb control group, you could resize this to a more reasonable size here. So now that we've got that, what I'm going to do is select my thumb control, open up my channel box and layer editor, select my inputs right here, and change up my values of normals. So you'll notice it's set up vertically like this. It's great, but not the best. That's okay. We're going to leave it as that. We're going to reselect our thumb control group here. This time around, we're going to use our rotation and sort of rotate it to a more reasonable diagonal setup. So this is how it's going to look like right here. So once you have that, great. So we have that already. We're going to repeat the same process now with set driven keys. So key, set driven key, set. We're going to load our thumb control, not our group, but our thumb control as our driver. So again, L thumb control is going to be our driver. So if we're going to face this, we're going to have a rotation of X. Now we're going to go select our thumb joints here. Let's see, middle, metacarpal, ring, thumb. There we go. So I'm going to cascade my hierarchy right here. I'm going to select my knuckle, end, and tip. Remember, this only has 1 joint instead of 2 joints in between. So now that you have that, load it as the driven. So you should have knuckle, end, and tip. Select that. Especially with your thumb, make doubly sure, absolutely sure that your pivots are set correctly. So it should be more or less onto the same value right here. So which it is, great. So I'm going to try to figure out with this, if I'm going to curl this up, my thumb, you need to give it enough space to make sure it touches also the fingers when it's curled. So X is pretty much out of the question because all it does, it twists. Z, Not so much. It sort of dislocates in a very odd position. So when I try Y, it actually gives me the proper setup right here for the curl. So now that we have that, we're going to select our rotation as Y right here. So again, thumb control, rotate X, and our thumb is going to be at rotation of Y. Make doubly sure, make absolutely sure it's set to 0. Everything is set right there. So rotation X, thumb control, rotation Y, your thumb. Then key it. Make sure it's in neutral stance. Once you have that, select your thumb control. And what you're going to do is see when you pull down the values if it's going to be negative or positive. So if I pull down, it's going to be positive. So I pull up, it's going to be negative. So I'm going to type in positive 90 right here. Let's see. Once I have that, what I'm going to do is sometimes you may have to individually select all your joints for your thumb. So what you're going to do right here on this point, right there, may have to fix this. Right there, because you want to give enough space in between the other fingers. So if you ever curl your fist, you know that it should touch the fingers like that. So more or less, you're gonna have to guesstimate where it's gonna be at. So once you have that, let's see, good, 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 good. Once you have that, okay, rotation X, rotate Y. You got this. Key it, double tap, you're good. Now I'm going to put in 0 again to go back to my neutral standpoint. Now this time I'm going to rekey this to a negative value of negative 90. Now as for this, I'm going to select all my joints here and actually pull it out to a Y. Now with your end of your the end joint of your thumb, I want you to sort of give it more exaggeration, as if your character has a hitchhiker's thumb. If you look at your hitchhiker's thumb, it sort of points out almost in a sharp angle. So you want to sort of exaggerate a little bit about that. So this seems a little bit, there we go. That's reasonable, more or less. So once you have that, double check, rotation negative 90, everything else should be set. Then key it, close it. Now when I select 0, go back to neutral state. So when you try it, it should be animating just like that. Now, you're almost done. Make sure you highlight, translate, scale and visibility on your thumb control. Right click, lock and hide selected. You got that? Then go to your attribute editor here. Go to your thumb control. Go to limit, limit information. Go to your rotate X, correct? So yeah, we're gonna enable our rotate X here. I'll put in positive 90 as my max, minimum, negative 90. So when I close this out, try it again. I won't overextend it. It's going to stop at its minimum and maximum right there. So once you have that, get your thumb control group and parent it to the thumb metacarpal. So you're going to parent it to the joint before that you have. So if we snapped it to the knuckle, what comes after before the knuckle? It's going to be the metacarpal. So pretty much everything else, you're going to repeat the same process with all the other fingers. The thumb, again, a little bit. It's going to be done a little bit differently. Other than that, this concludes today's screencast tutorial of Autodesk Maya.